if we never dance again. We're 13 minutes away from 10 o'clock. It is time to talk technology. We do that with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew, good morning.
Morning, Nick.
This is an interesting one to me. It's a bit of a David versus Goliath in its own way, but they're both Goliath in this scenario. Epic Games, who people might not have heard of, but they make some very popular video games, such as I think Fortnite is one of theirs, versus Apple. What's happening here?
It's all about money, of course, Nick, which is so many of these battles are all about money. But Apple, when they created the App Store and came up with the idea of being able to have people download apps, and they just said, we'll just stick a little Apple tax on there. So we'll take 30%. You're okay with it, aren't you? And most people went, okay, I'm still getting sales out there. And then Apple said, you're selling things in the games. Look, we might take 30% of that as well. So you had no choice. If you had an app on an iPhone and then it went through the App Store, which it had to do for the iPhone, you basically paid the Apple tax. Now, Epic Games have said, you know what, that sounds a little bit like monopoly behaviour. So how about we slap a lawsuit on you and see if we can make it able to have, say, just the in-app purchases not go through the Apple tax regime. Now, this questions the entire business model of Apple. So they're not going to take this line down. They're not going to say, sure thing, Epic Games, we'll let you have a different way of paying for things in the games and everyone else is okay. Because if Epic Games wins this, every other app developer says, oh, that applies to me as well. There's the precedent that's been set. So it really is a case of lawyers at 30 paces and go for it. I can just imagine the team of lawyers both parties have got working on this.
But just to make sure I understand this, Epic isn't saying we don't think Apple should get any cut of the game purchase. They're saying that once I own that game, if I'm then making in-game purchases, Apple shouldn't get 30% of that.
That's the first part. So it might develop further. It might go somewhere else. But that's the first part. They're saying that we should be able to sell things in the game that you've already purchased through the App Store. We should be able to allow our customers using our game to make a purchase in the game through our own system. Now, of course, Apple says it's all part of the security. It's all the trust that people have in Apple. We need to process all those transactions. Translate that to, we want to take our 30%. Whereas Epic Games are saying there are surely other ways that are secure that you can approve of, Mr. Apple, but other ways that are secure and safe for customers to make purchases in the game. As consumers, you and I don't really care, Nick. If we're in a game, if we want to make a purchase,
I'm paying.
Right.
You know, it is what it is.
Who gets a bit of the cut? We don't really care about that much, but these companies obviously care a significant amount. And again, I really think it questions the entire business model of Apple if Epic Games wins this, because it will just open the floodgates.
30%, it has been noted, is a lot of change. Like you call it the Apple tax, but that's a chunk of money there. Yeah. They can't be the only company to complain. I seem to remember Spotify having a similar issue.
Yeah, and certainly there's some issues through the European Union at the moment as well. Similar sort of processes. I suppose I've picked on the Epic Games example one because it is the big one, but you're right, there are other organisations that say 30% is too much. And if I'm a little app developer working in my garage and I get a few little sales, I'm probably okay with the fact that Apple charges, because I don't want to set up the infrastructure that Apple has set up. But when you get to be Spotify type size, you've got the infrastructure already. You don't really need all that Apple infrastructure. So there's a good argument there that you should be able to have a way of putting something onto an Apple phone without having to go through the Apple Store. But again, this is the way Apple, from day dot, Apple said with their Apple Mac computers, with their iPhones, with their iPods, we own the whole ecosystem. You either play with our ecosystem or you don't. There's no halfway.
And for many people, that's what they want. The end-level consumer, they like that trust. They like that, we're not talking about people saying, well, we're going to snap it in half and throw the iPhone in the bin. No. It's always amazing when we have these conversations about issues as complex as this, the money we're talking about, to remember that, 22 years ago, Microsoft got in trouble because it was bundling a web browser with an operating system. And that was the biggest controversy imaginable at the time. Antitrust and anti-monopoly back then.
And anti-monopoly, and that's the thing, when you, and it's almost one of those things that you don't want to be too successful. When you become so successful, you become such a market leader and get huge market share. And that's where Apple is, in particular in the US. They've got huge market share, about 56% market share of all smartphones that are sold. That's fantastic. Wouldn't you love to have 56% market share? But then you go too far. It's how you abuse that power, I suppose, is the secret here. And again, I go back to the old DOS computers and Apple computers. And one of the reasons that I think that the whole Microsoft DOS operating system, IBM compatible computers got huge market share over Apple is because they let anyone play on their system, whereas Apple said, no, it's got to be our ecosystem. Now, that's a positive for them. Back then, it meant that they had a tiny market share, but now people want that ease of use. So it works, they just know it works, I can trust it, end of story.
Matthew, changing topic a little bit, but staying on things we do with our smartphones. If you got a link in a text from someone you didn't know, would you click on it?
I try not to,
Yeah, I try not to as well. I assume I'm not going to do that. I know not to click on links that are emailed to me that look a bit suspicious. But we're expected to scan any old QR code these days and just hope for the best, aren't we?
We didn't know about QR codes a few years ago. People had no idea what that funny-looking square was. Now we're all experts on QR codes.
Oh, yeah, very good.
But we do trust them implicitly. We walk up to a cafe, we just, I've got to do that, otherwise I can't walk in and have my coffee. Oh, it takes me to some site and I put some details in and away I go. I don't really think about what's happening behind the scenes. So there was one man in Adelaide who took full advantage of this. He printed up a bunch of QR code stickers, and everywhere he could find some stickers around his suburb in Adelaide, he went and stuck his own sticker over the top. So you walked up to a cafe, you scanned it, you went straight to an anti-vax site.
Oh, no.
Now, you might think, oh, this cafe's an anti-vax cafe. Oh, that's a bit strange. Oh, well, I suppose that's what they're doing. But there might have been a sign-up page there as well to sign up for information, because again, you get used to putting information in. You then started questioning, was the government pushing anti-vax? Oh, I'm a bit confused. Anyway, I want to have my coffee, so on I go. The guy was finally caught. He's subject to maybe a $10,000 fine if he's found guilty of going and tampering with COVID-19 infrastructure.
It's quite a fine.
It is quite a fine. But the interesting part is that we don't really know what's there. There could be 2,500 characters of stuff. Now, if you walked up to a cafe and it said www.antivax.com, you'd probably go, I'm not going to go and type that in.
No.
But when it's a QR code, you and I can't read it, but our phones obviously can. So it's something just to be aware of. And I suppose it's the whole thing. When we have technology, people always try and work out some way to put a scam in place.
In a weird way, I'm surprised it hasn't happened earlier. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, a QR code can function just like a link.
Yep, exactly.
Absolutely, just like a link.
The amount of information it can contain, it can have email addresses. I mean, I've got QR codes in the back of my business card. You scan that, it gives you my name and my email address and my phone number. So there's so much information it can contain within that QR code. But you're right, we just don't think about it. It's amazing someone doesn't know it before.
Matthew Dickinson, smart technology. We talk about smart lights, we talk about smart appliances. You know, I got a text earlier from my robot vacuum cleaner letting me know it got stuck again. I think it's a new record. It only made it about 7 minutes before jamming itself up. Smart glass?
Yeah, it seems like anything you want to market now has to have the word smart in front of it. But you're familiar with double glazing because we're in a studio here with double glazing. So it's well known that double glazing is good for insulation, good for sound. The problem with double glazing is it just says whatever the temperature is outside, I'm just going to isolate that from the inside temperature. Now, there are times you might want that to come through. So in the middle of winter, you might want that nice warm air from the sun to come through into inside and heat your house up a bit. Smart glass actually has a bunch of micro mirrors between the two panes of glass.
Wow.
So in winter, it will redirect any sunlight it can find and bounce that through into inside to try and warm your house, your room, your building up. And in summer, the opposite will happen. It's nice and hot outside. You've got this blazing sun. You're trying to keep the place cool. So it will redirect that sun to bounce as much of that away as possible. Automatically done. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to clean the mirrors because they're in that isolation part between the two. They have a noble gas such as krypton or argon. Anything with krypton in it's got to be cool.
Yeah, it's got to be great. It's got to be amazing.
So the idea is that it will reduce energy bills. With their early testing, they're saying 35%, because obviously it can bring heat in when it's cold. It can keep heat out when it's hot. So that's a 35% reduction. What they try and do is obviously reduce the amount of energy we use in our CO2 we produce in our daily lives. Fantastic.
But also natural daylight coming in. I mean, that's got to be great as well.
And that's the thing, rather than having artificial lighting, because obviously natural lighting is good for us, but not too much of it. So it can actually redirect where you're standing. If you're standing in the middle of a room and there's a big glass pane, it will redirect it to the sides of the room rather than directly at you and blind you with the light. So all of these little micro mirrors, you can still see through the glass. It all happens automatically. It uses thermoelectric properties to power the little micro mirrors. They don't need much power, but just unbelievable. Again, we're talking about prototypes here, Nick.
I was going to ask. We're not shopping for this yet.
We're not going and
ducking
ordering
down to the hardware store and grabbing any.
No, that's right. But with all things like this, the prototype starts, they do their testing, it's got the proof of concept, and then we'll see it in large office blocks where heating and cooling bills are huge. We'll see it in large industrial buildings, and then we'll get to the stage where, I can make my choice for normal glass or pay 20% extra, 30% extra, and I can get some smart mirrors, smart glass, whatever it might be, in our homes. And I think that'll be the point. And I'm probably thinking 5 years here, Nick, but that'll be the point that will be very exciting.
I think certainly, not to make a pun on this, but the writing has been on the wall when it came to energy and glass, especially in those big buildings, for a long time, and people have been looking for ways to stop that wastage for a while now.
And normally the solutions I've seen in the past, say a skyscraper, they've put some glass in that reflects most of the heat because they're trying to keep the heat out more than anything else, and they might be solar panels, so they might generate a bit of power. But this is the first one that I've seen actually be active rather than passive in trying to control that temperature. I just think people are very clever, very ingenious, and it's all well and good to have the idea sitting around the pub, but then putting it into practice, I think this is just brilliant.
I can't even imagine the engineering that goes into that. Matthew Dickinson will do this again in a fortnight. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Technology there with Matthew Dickinson. We are rapidly coming up to 10 o'clock.